Welcome back to another episode of From the Brink. I'm your host, Colby Reynolds, and with me, like always, is YCT Vice Chair Clay Gossman and Hitching Post Editor-in-Chief Paul Dehlinger. On today's episode of From the Brink, we have Katherine Cochran as our guest. She's the Secretary in Raiders Defending Life, a pro-life organization here at Texas Tech. Katherine, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
How are y'all doing today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I haven't been very productive this week, but, that's to be expected.
It's been really chilly here in Lubbock.
Yeah, this cold front just kind of came in out of nowhere.
And never thought I would see Lubbock, the day where Lubbock was overcast, like an entire week, right?
It has been an entire week, hasn't it?
It's been basically an entire week of just drizzle and stuff.
Weird.
Mm-hmm. Now back on topic. So, Katherine, how'd you get involved with the pro-life movement in general? Where'd you get your passion for this?
Well, I have, I'd say always, being a Christian and seeing the, atrocity of abortion occurring in our country, I have always wanted to do something. I mean, at one point I thought I wanted to go to what I call the front lines, which would be more of going to the medical field or doing something I thought was impactful. But going to be bioethicist, I don't know, something like that. I was really trying to do something, or wanting to do something, but not sure what that something was. Well, God was just like, okay, just wait a second. And when I moved to Lubbock and came to Texas Tech, I ran into Raiders Defending Life in the free speech area. Didn't know that they existed. And they said, do you think abortion should be legal? And I said, no, I don't. And they said, well, why do you think that? And I said, well, I think the unborn child is a human being and should therefore be protected. He was like, well, so do we. We're Raiders Defending Life. And I was like, I didn't know y'all existed. And so there we go. And then I'm a part of Raiders Defending Life. And that was an exciting first step in preparation for what happened last year, which was Planned Parenthood announcing that they were going to be moving or building a facility here in Lubbock. And that's kind of what gave me the opportunity to be on whatever I call the front lines and actually do something, hopefully, for women and for children.
Now, what did this is more like I'm just curious. What did RDL do prior to this whole ordinance deal? Because I didn't really hear much about y'all on campus, and I've been in YCT for over a year now.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've had to really switch gears because of this political front that has come up and been necessary. But before that, Raiders Defending Life started in 2014, and they were very focused on reaching the campus population as far as talking about life topics. And what they did largely was bring in speakers to talk about abortion, but I wanted to say adoption, to bring speakers in to talk about adoption and give testimonies as far as so one of the founders became pregnant while she was going to school at Texas Tech. And so they brought her in and allowed her to share her story and to reach people on the I don't want to say the emotional side because that has a connotation of being not important, but on the side of the pro-life movement that is showing the value of life and of stories that value life and of successes of stories that valued life.
Emphasis on human worth.
Yes, and that these people's lives didn't get torn down when they chose life for their child. And they drew in large crowds. There has never been dues. This is kind of a side note for Raiders Defending Life because we've always just trying to just bring in a lot of people to our meetings to kind of be very far-reaching is kind of what their goal was. And I would come to a meeting and we'd pack out the Senate room with people, young college people, non-traditional students, people I've never seen before, strollers, just people, so many people were there to hear the speakers that they brought out. And so that was where I really sold and really did well before this political front came and kind of had to shift gears. Of course, COVID's thrown in there and that changed things too. But anyway, that's what Raiders Defending Life did prior to now.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned your Christian faith being a motivating factor for you, because it's interesting because the pro-life, the abortion argument, it's not inherently a Christian argument. There's no reason an atheist should be for abortion. I don't think there's a rational kind of reason this is the atheist position on the issue, but it does seem like it is overwhelmingly, Christians that are pro-life. But to that point, have you ever met more secular people that are pro-life or that are against legal abortion?
That's a good question. Nobody comes off the top of my head. especially since organizations like Texas Right to Life have recently become Christian organizations. Like that was a new thing. But I totally understand and agree with what you're saying, and I certainly don't jump to that conclusion of assuming God when I'm talking to somebody about life. I go straight to what is the unborn and trying to ask them if they think life is valuable, because I think regardless of your worldview, an inherent worth of humanity is kind of essential, and if you deny that, then there's a slippery slope to so many other human ills that you can easily get to.
Yeah, and I mean, I always think that's like a more effective argument for people, because I mean, for those who are, even if they're like nominally religious but don't really, think of like their religion as the motivating thing that makes their decisions. If you go straight to like God, they're like, oh, these people are just like, Jesus people. But if you like get at a more like, rational level, it's really hard to be like, yeah, why do I think it's okay to just like, kill a human being? Just like, I mean, I've always, the funniest thing to me is like, I was like, okay, so like, right after the baby's born, we all agree, like, you can't just like, blow its brains out. But, 30 seconds earlier when it was still in the mother's womb, then it would have been totally fine. I'm like, well, I mean, when you make it that close to distinction, people are like, yeah, that really doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's 8 inches down the birth canal, right? Yeah. It's what changes there. And there's a common argument that I think is very useful that was created by his name is Scott Klusendorf. Talking about any last names, but his argument is abbreviated SLED, SLED, and this acronym lines out 4 major differences between the child in the womb and the child outside the womb. S stands for size. The baby's smaller, now it's bigger, more or less. But that's a terrible argument for deciding human worth, right, on size, because humans are all different sizes.
A person's a person, no matter how small.
There we go. We'll go to Dr. Seuss, which, unless he's canceled. But I think that's a great quote. Horton Hears a Who. First one is size. S. L is level of development. If we try to argue humanity based on level of development, that gets really sticky really quick. Environment is E, which is the environment being the womb versus not the womb. And then D, SLED, is degree of dependency. The child was very dependent on its mother inside the womb, still pretty dependent on its mother outside the womb. And there's other people in different stages of life that have to depend on other people, like someone who's in surgery has to be very dependent on other people in order to make it through that surgery and come back out into a form of consciousness. So those are the 4 main differences, if you really think about it, between an unborn child in the womb and a child or an adult outside of the womb. And none of those are good reasons to argue for the killing of the unborn child.
Do you ever get the question, like, but what about it being your body and your choice? Do you ever get that since, like, you're a woman or anything from anybody?
I've never gotten that. I'm sure some of the women, some of the girls of Raiders Spinning Life have gotten that before, but I haven't.
Okay.
Well, I guess going into more recent things and localized things, right? Because I think we could talk all day about the importance of pro-life as a national thing and the philosophy that sort of underlines it. Most of us know here, all of us know here, that we've had a really impactful really going back to like August, September, right? So about a year, going close to a year now, of the pro-life movement here in Lubbock. Katherine, can you kind of walk us through sort of the timeline that we've been going through with the Sanctuary Cities for the Unborn ordinance, and maybe explain a little bit about what that is to our audience?
Certainly. So it all goes back. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I am going to go back to...
There was a man named Mark.
It does go back there. But right before Mark, I am going to mention, this is 3 years ago now, in March of 2018, I believe, is when an anonymous $9 million donation was given to Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas to build a facility in the West Texas region, which had been largely lacking in abortion facilities for the last 7-ish years.
Yeah, because the last one was in Lubbock, and then they shut it down, right?
Yes, there was also one, I believe, in Midland and in Odessa, maybe.
Yes, it was Odessa. I remember that. Yeah, I remember them talking about it.
They all shut down.
Do we know where that money came from?
No.
Interesting.
I don't.
Okay.
It was intentionally anonymous, so you could go on conspiracy rabbit trails there, but I have no idea.
George Soros.
I wouldn't be surprised.
No, I don't think it's anything like that. But can you guys $9 million?
$9 million. I also want to mention in 2019, Texas legislative session passed a Senate bill that had an amendment portion that was very clear, very concise. I think it's one sentence long that mentions that nothing in that particular bill was meant to infringe upon local municipalities' ability to outlaw or prohibit or restrict abortion. So that is the playing field of where we come with the sanctuary city for the unborn movement. And yes, Markley Dixon, the
fireworks salesman out of East Texas,
the champion and founder, who's running around currently and has been probably since that 2019 legislative session, trying to convince cities in the Texas and now Nebraska states to make their cities sanctuary cities for the unborn. So we met him in September of 2020.
August, yeah.
And he posited his dreams and vision for making Lubbock a sanctuary city for the unborn, especially in the light of us knowing that Planned Parenthood was going to be moving in. In fact, they started posting job listings in July, and said that they would be opening by the end of the year, is what we knew. So we were kind of on high alert at that point, trying to figure out what we could do. At the same time, at the end of August, our state senators Charles Perry, as well as our representatives Dustin Burrows and John Frullo, gave an official letter to our esteemed mayor, Dan Pope, back in August, saying, hey, why don't we try to make Lubbock a sanctuary city for the unborn? Look at this ordinance. It's been currently passed since 13 Texas cities at the time. Take a look, see what you think. Let's talk about it. That was the inception point, and unfortunately, needless to say, Mayor Pope didn't really want to talk about it. In fact, we tried to attend so many city council meetings last semester throughout the fall.
And meet your mayor meetings too, like Market Street. Remember those?
Yes.
Coffee with the mayor things.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. I remember we were all up there. 7:30, 8 in the morning, with coffee with the mayor, being respectful, talking to Mr. Mayor. We weren't the only ones either. Just asking him to please consider it. And I remember leaving there, him telling us that he's pro-life, I'm pro-life. And then it wasn't very long after that we heard his bit. I can't remember which radio host he was talking with, where he compared the coming of Planned Parenthood to that of opening a new church or opening a new United supermarket. And we're like, well, hold on a second. How can you be a pro-life person and compare an abortion facility to a church or a place where you buy food? It seemed a little far out there. But anyway, sorry, I'm digressing. That's the timeline. Okay, so actually I was just making sure I had all the dates correct, because we filed the initiative to collect signatures on September 25th. That was the day that we filed. And we filed this because in the city charter, we realized that if we got enough signatures, that we could make our mayor and city council talk about it. Since they were refusing to bring it up in the countless amount of city council meetings that we attended, we decided that we would make them bring it up. And our city charter conveniently had a way for us to do that. So we needed 3,651 signatures, about 25% of the voting population of the prior mayoral election, and we collected that in about 16 days. And we had 30, and so then we
went way over
1,000 more, just to keep. And they kept pouring in too. People just kept pouring in the signatures. Here's some more. People collecting them. We're just going door to door to their neighbors, to their churches, to rallies. It was crazy. We turned those in. The city had to go through each and every one after we went through each and every one and validated them and announced that our petition was valid, which was like, yes. And we filed those on October 13th. And so finally we knew that would make the city council have to have a city council meeting about it. And
it forced their hand.
It forced their hand, yes. And that happened on November 17th. And y'all probably remember that day. The day that live in history.
How late were we out?
I wasn't able to make it that day.
Well, how late was everyone out that night, Katherine?
It started, I think, 5 p.m. and I was out till midnight. The 11 o'clock or midnight, I was out there. And we did a Whataburger run at the end there. But I believe the testimonies themselves lasted 5 hours at least. Mostly positive. A handful. When I say a handful, I'm talking 5 tops. were negative in the sense that they were advising the council to not make Lubbock a sanctuary city for the unborn. But everyone else, overwhelming majority of people just making all sorts of arguments, whether they were religious, they were scientific, they were even legal. We had representatives, we had the legal consultant from Texas Right to Life come from Austin to talk to the city council about the legality and the structure of the ordinance itself. He was very respectful. He was very just kind of plain and here are the facts. And Mayor Pope didn't like that. Mayor Pope didn't like that at all. He had been berating people since the beginning. Stop bringing up God. Stop bringing up Scripture. We're talking about the ordinance. Well, Mr. John Seago comes up with Texas Right to Life, talks about the ordinance, and somehow Mayor Pope gets offended and says, "Why are you talking down to me like this?" And John Seago,
he said that? Really?
He interrupts John Seago and is like, "Don't talk to us like we don't know what it says, okay? Don't get." He's telling him to get off his high horse, and John Seago just kind of was very confused because he didn't have any kind of air of arrogance in his voice. He was just talking matter of factly, and I really wonder if what he was saying was getting at Mayor Pope, because we are not here to talk about the constitutionality of the ordinance, and that's a whole other legal discussion. That's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's there's definitely a discussion there, and I don't think that our council is willing to have that discussion, unfortunately.
Well, for those who don't know, could you kind of talk about what is actually in the ordinance?
Yes. So briefly, if I can, just walk in Mark Dixon's footsteps, who's explained this to me so many times. The ordinance works, and it works off of the fact that in Texas law, there are still laws, quote unquote, on the books that are prohibiting or restricting abortions in some sense. But because of the Roe v. Wade decision, they are not being enforced currently, but they're still technically on the books, and that's where the legal dispute goes in as to what are they valid? What is their status? They're there, but they're not enforceable, whatever that means. But that's where the kind of loophole that the Sanctuary Cities Ordinance falls in, and that in light of the Senate bill amendment that explicitly mentions cities' rights and abilities to restrict abortion on the municipal level, the Sanctuary Cities Ordinance takes those laws and says, in this jurisdiction where this ordinance is enforced, any abortionist who commits an abortion will have a $2,000 fine on his head for every single abortion he commits after Roe v. Wade is overturned. That is what is known as the public enforcement mechanism of the ordinance. That will not be enacted or enforced until the hopeful overturning of Roe v. Wade, but it is certainly a deterrent. If an abortionist knows that that he could be incurring that kind of fines and that will be on his head if Roe v. Wade's overturned, then that's a deterrent, which is that's the purpose of that enforcement mechanism, even though it's not currently able to be enforced. The second and most immediate enforcement mechanism is the private one, and that is a protection of the ability to sue anybody who aids or abets an abortion in the jurisdiction that the ordinance is placed over. So any relative of the aborted child, so we're talking grandmother, aunt, cousin, sibling, father, except the mother. The mother cannot sue or be sued. She is protected legally in the ordinance. But anybody who's related to the unborn child can sue anybody that aided or abetted or performed the abortion, and that can happen at any point. And so that is how the ordinance works. That is also a deterrent mechanism for any abortionist who thinks they want to come here and perform an abortion, knowing that they could be sued and protected in that lawsuit in the city ordinance is not a very appealing prospect. But that's the gist of how the ordinance works.
And take us back to November 17th, right? The day that will live in infamy,
that's
right?
What I was trying to say earlier, yes.
How did our 7-person city council, our conservative mayor, and I believe 4 of our city council members who ran as conservatives vote on this pro-life ordinance?
Yes, I missed that important decision. After 5-6 hours of deliberation, testimony, hearing, we went back in to hear their decision, and one by one, the majority of them espoused values of life and pro-life sentiment, but proceeded to vote the ordinance down, and the ordinance was voted down 7-0 on November 17th of 2020.
I remember that.
I remember it was a gut punch day. I figured that after 5 hours we would have gotten at least one vote, right? But
I bet
zero.
some of those would have been, or some of those decisions by the councilmen are probably petty because they kept me here for 5 hours. I'm going to show them.
I tend to think people aren't that petty.
I don't know.
No, I'm a little skeptical of that, but yeah, I am I mean, one, I could see the knee-jerk reactions to like, oh no, like, don't get in an argument with the feds over this. But yeah, I am surprised that some of them didn't vote against it, even just for like, the saying they're pro-life. Because I mean, if 4 people are going to vote against it, why not be one of the ones that like says like, well, I tried to get it passed. I was, the one who.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like the Republicans. Whenever there's a Democrat in office, they can always say, "Well, we're the ones who are in favor of reducing the spending, right?"
Yeah.
So, hey, a Latrell Joy or a Jeff Griffith, right? You can be that one, right? And you might win some votes over it. But no, 0-7. Talk me through. How did that feel in the moment, right? Mm-hmm. And then the preceding weeks, right, or the succeeding weeks there.
Yeah, that's a good question. We anticipated a vote no. By most of them, it's a good point that maybe one of them would like, well, but they were I felt like all the city council was very against their people. I tried to talk to my district representative, Latrell Joy, and they just seemed very put off and very distant and like, y'all don't know what you're talking about kind of air, which was very saddening. So we anticipated the letdown. However, what I did anticipate was them to ride a very quiet, high horse in that voting down. They to try to claim both sides and say we are pro-life, yet we're not going to support this, and try to even appeal to God, and appeal to they appeal to I can't remember, but they tried to have both. They had tried to have both sides, have the best of both worlds. Yeah. They said we're pro-life, but this is not what we're supposed to do. And I was just so mad, and I knew what was happening. I knew it was going to happen, but I was so livid sitting there. And then afterwards, I just cried so hard because I can't believe that these people would be so staunch in light of, like you said, the 5 hours of testimony that they had just witnessed.
Yeah, but there is some silver lining to all this, which we'll get into here, right? Per the Lubbock City Charter, right, the ordinance does not, even though it got downvoted, will go to a referendum, which is where we are right now. Yes. So starting really in March, we've been campaigning. Some of us have been campaigning, including yourself, Katherine. Why don't you talk to us about like what we've done so far, what's been done so far, right? With the campaigning, right, and how the referendum has been shaping up on the grassroots level.
Okay. Yes. So that's part 2 of the Lubbock City Charter initiative and referendum section. The initiative is we submitted that we were going to file petitions to make the city council discuss or consider the ordinance. They did consider the ordinance. They voted it down. The city charter gives us a step 2, a second chance, and that's to put this ordinance to a vote by the people of Lubbock, hence referendum. And that is what we did as soon as we possibly could, which was at the beginning of December, right before Christmas break. We submitted to have this put to a referendum, and the election day was decided to be May 1st of 2021. So we're coming up very close to that. And that was it. Then we knew we had to campaign our hearts out. And so just last weekend, we all participated in a Students for Life deployment, where students from all over Texas, various pro-life campuses and pro-life organizations from all over Texas came and helped us go door to door and just share the news with people about this vote in May, because it is a small off-year election that if you're not particularly politically active, you may not know about, although with the kind of airtime that the Sanctuary Cities movement has gotten, I think a lot of people are learning about it, or hopefully the right people know about it, and that might sound bad, but
hopefully, yeah, and you're exactly right. It's about getting your own voter base out, yes, right, and not getting the other ones. And well, with a mayoral or not a May race like this, right? An off year at that, right? Realistically, we can expect maybe 15,000 voters, right? A city like Lubbock, 20,000, and you're just hoping, right, that 8,000 or 10 or 11,000 of those are your own voters, right? And tell me too, what have y'all gentlemen seen so far? Whether that's pro-life signs out, right? Whether that's talking to people that you guys know about the referendum. What have each of y'all seen about this so far with the referendum?
Well, I mean, we kind of are in a bubble. I mean, we're talking to people within the actual movement for it. But yeah, I have seen like a lot of signs showing support for it. So I mean, that's very anecdotal. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a popular movement, and I mean, just like going off the number of signatures already, but it's like I have seen very little pushback. I mean, I know you do talk to the secular society, so you have seen the pushback, but
my best friends at the secular society,
but I have not seen like a whole bunch of signs saying like, hey, vote this down, which I kind of would have expected. You would have expected a lot of, especially with how pro-choice like the Democratic Party has become. Like you would think there'd be that knee-jerk reaction, but I think a lot of people are. I mean, and even just broader, kind of like spent politically after this last election. They're just like, like whatever. Like, no, Trump's not president anymore. But like that's the one thing pro-life people like care about. That kind of transcends like their like politics. They're like, no, pro-life.
Yeah, I mean, you can get religious Democrats to vote for this ordinance. I don't doubt.
Which there are some. I mean, I know we all kind of think it's weird, especially like like we said how pro-choice the Democratic Party is, but there are some.
I wonder how much, or I wonder like if there's a certain amount of certain voter, right, that's going to go out and vote for this ordinance, vote for Proposition A, because they've seen the Democrats go completely off the rails in states like Virginia, right, up in New York and California, right, with pro-choice legislation that's been passed up there. What do y'all think about that, right?
I mean, yeah, that would surprise me with some. I mean, you do have to kind of follow politics a little closer to hear about that. But if you had like heard about like I've seen atheists, I've seen slightly pro-choice. Pro-choice people who like heard the Ralph Northam thing on the radio show where it's like, the baby would be taken care of, and then there'd be a discussion about whether they keep it or not. I'm like, what? Like, what is he talking about? That's just murdering a newborn baby at that point. Yeah, there was some pretty wacky stuff in both New York and Virginia with like talking about like, I mean, one of the congressmen in Virginia, I think, straight up asked the woman, it's like, so the mother's crowning and that would still be okay to have an abortion. It's like, well, like our bill doesn't, specify that. So like, so you're saying it would be legal? I'm like, well, yeah. I was like, so.
Wow. Yeah.
That's scary.
I know, right? I wonder if I think the rebuke to that is a localized pro-life movement, like what we see in Lubbock or. What's the city total now, Catherine? 26, right? 26, 27, right?
20, almost that. 24.
Yeah.
Yeah. 24.
And what is the largest city on that by chance as well?
I believe it's still Big Spring.
Big Spring.
Oh, wow.
Which is about just under 30,000 people.
Yeah. Is that right in your neighborhood, Paul?
Yeah. No, I actually have family in Big Spring.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And Lubbock is 224,000, I think.
I'd say a bit higher than that, but
it was closer to 300,000, not quite 300, but
yeah,
almost.
I'm with Catherine on that.
I think.
So roughly 3 times the size of Big Spring.
Yep, 253,000.
Okay.
So, well, that would be that'd be an entire degree, right? Bigger.
This is monumental.
Yeah.
If this passes, it'll influence the region. Definitely, we'd probably see maybe see cities like I'd bet you'd see like Amarillo at least consider this. Maybe go down to the Permian Basin, Midland, Odessa.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we keep in mind West Texas is the most conservative part of Texas. There's no huge cities, so it's all these smaller 200,000.
Right, but that's what organizations like Planned Parenthood or this mysterious $9 million donor right are looking to do is they know that Lubbock is, while there's only 250,000 people that are living in the city proper, right? There's an entire region around that it would be dependent on like Planned Parenthood in Lubbock for surgical or pill abortions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
at this point, they've had to travel all the way to Dallas or Fort Worth or across New Mexico border. I can't remember what the closest one.
Clovis.
The Clovis or
Carlsbad.
maybe.
So there's still not cities in
I'm not positive, but the point is that there's not an abortion facility very close to anybody in the West Texas region until now, and Lubbock will be that hub that brings people in from San Angelo, the Permian Basin, and Amarillo, Abilene, all of those places, which is not what we want.
No, we don't. So I've been saying this since the beginning of the ordinance. I think there's going to be one city that could be responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade, right, or KCB Planned Parenthood, or taking a Supreme Court case up to that level, right? We could very well be arguing about this case in 10 years as Lubbock v. Planned Parenthood, right, or Mark Lee Dixon versus Planned Parenthood, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good a segue to a broader point. You talked about the ordinance specifies once Roe v. Wade is overturned, because a lot of these bills are kind of intended to be knocked down by a higher court, so it can be appealed to the Supreme Court. With the current makeup of the Supreme Court, and that's barring any court packing, which that's now being talked about. But what do y'all think the chances of this getting overturned? Because I have been a lot more skeptical of some more optimistic people. I think you have 3 justices that would willingly overturn Roe v. Wade. You have Thomas, you have Amy Coney Barrett, and you have Alito, and then the other 6 are Kavanaugh basically got confirmed because he said he wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. And, Gorsuch has come from that kind of libertarian view on. Well,
I don't know if you would need necessarily an outright overturnment, right? Which is what don't get me wrong on this. I thought Barrett and Thomas were the only 2 on the record saying that they would vote to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, but I feel like the way Alito votes, it does seem like he would be willing to.
But what you would need would be a shift in the legal standard, right? For instance, could you have a case where you would you'd say a local municipality can have an ordinance like that, right? Or a state, for instance, right, can just outright ban abortion.
Well, but then you would that was what Roe v. Wade decided.
It was the protection of the first trimester, right?
Yeah.
You would just need to revoke that part of Roe v. Wade, right? So I guess you would need to overturn portions of the.
Yeah, well, because that's kind of what we're going for now. I think we'd all agree that our end goal would be illegal nationwide, but right now, overturning Roe v. Wade doesn't make abortion illegal everywhere. It just says your state can make the decision.
But I have a lot more faith. I have a lot more faith in Lubbock, Texas, or Amarillo, or anywhere in the Permian Basin to vote on an ordinance like this than I do with, even Austin at this point, right? Even our state government. So, what I'm trying to say is I totally support local ordinances like this because. They're going to be the ones to challenge the Supreme Court on this one, right? And they're going to be the ones to actually stand up and say, hey, we don't want abortions in this country. That is the end goal. Right?
Yeah.
So
I'd also like to point out in the Roe v. Wade, and I wish I had it pulled up now, but it would take me too long to pull it up now. But in reading the Roe v. Wade decision at one point, I found, and this decision was made in the 70s, right? And so one of the largest appeals by the deciding justice who wrote it, which I don't remember his name, which I should, was that, and I'm almost quoting this directly, but I'm not quoting this directly, but I remember it's burned into my brain. He said that because the philosophical, the theological, and the scientific communities are not sure when life begins, then the Justice Department is in no place to make that decision. So this decision stands until it can be shown that the unborn are human and deserving of the right to life, and then the woman's right to privacy, which is where this the Roe v. Wade decision rested, the 14th Amendment, I believe.
Yeah, it was the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, the right to privacy clause that's read into the 14th Amendment is where that decision was rested. He said until the unborn can be shown to be human. And when that happens, the woman's right to privacy is no longer primal. Yeah, it's no longer a first priority. And then we have an actual human being to that, and that changes everything. And I believe the word used is that this decision would collapse. I believe that's the word he used. This decision would collapse if the unborn can be shown to be human and deserving of rights to life, because then that would supersede a woman's right to privacy. And that's where we're at nowadays. or I say nowadays, it's almost 50 years after that decision, and we have progressed in scientific and embryological studies to show the uniqueness and genetic
Makeup.
and distinction of the unborn child from the mother. Once the egg and the sperm unite, it's a whole new entity, and the only thing the mother does is provide it nourishment and oxygen. She doesn't add anything to it that it doesn't already possess in its genetic makeup, and everything that zygote becomes till it grows into a grown adult elderly person in a nursing home is contained within that genetic fiber of that entity, of that person, of that human being. That's how you and I came to be. That's how we are who we are, and that is pretty much well known. It is still disputed, but it's pretty well known. It's a really good scientific arguments in that regard, and so I think that should be revisited if, as far as overturning Roe v. Wade is concerned.
And I guess understanding that, right? What do you think we as conservatives can be doing differently? We as pro-lifers, I should say, should be doing to market that to the median voter, the median person who might not be supportive of, say, an ordinance like this, right? Or just general pro-life legislation that might fizzle in the Texas House. What do you think?
That's a really good question, and there's a lot of pro-life organizations who have different answers to that. And unfortunately, there's dispute among the pro-life movement on what direction to take and which actions are good, which legislation is good, which one's bad. And then in that we have various pro-life organizations who do not support the sanctuary cities for the Unborn movement for various reasons, and we don't need to go into that. But as far as reaching the median voter, I have found that not only is it good to ask them about their value of human life, what is the unborn? I think that's an essential question, asking what is the unborn? Because if it's not human, then, well, yeah, you can do whatever you want with it. But if it is, then we open up a whole host of rights, actually, because it's a person. And we have a long history of disenfranchising various peoples for various reasons and dehumanizing them, and we are doing that again. And I think bringing that up is really important to reaching your average person who has sentiments and values, especially about human life. But alternatively, I have reached roadblock with people as far as getting, quote unquote, getting political. And I know here in YCT circles that's not an issue at all, and I commend y'all for that. But there are people who consider themselves pro-life that do not want to get political, and I don't blame them. I don't think it should be a political issue either. It's about life or about babies. But the problem is it is a political issue at this point, especially with the sanctuary cities for the Unborn movement. I think this is the best effort that we could be putting our money in our time, our blood, our sweat, whatever it is, putting effort towards as far as saving children and helping mothers is concerned, is this particular local political movement. And it's very hard sometimes to convince people to, quote unquote, to get political because of all the sour connotation that brings.
Yeah. I was looking at a stat here. This was really gut-wrenching right here. What percentage of babies, right, that you determined to have Down syndrome right in the womb in Denmark get aborted?
Like 99%.
98%.
Yeah.
So that, I know, I guess gut-wrenching.
I thought it was Norway.
Norway, Iceland, and Denmark are basically close to 100%, which, goes to show you what the logical extent of like having a very pro-choice society is, right? You're going to weed out supposed, I'm saying air quotes here, imperfections, right? Which, if that doesn't chill your bones, then I don't know what you're doing right there, right? 98% in Denmark, right? So I think marketing that, right? Understanding that would be the end course of abortion would be a key move for conservatives. But I ask you two gentlemen, what do y'all think pro-life conservatives or just pro-lifers in general, right, can do to better market the pro-life movement to conservatives, to people in Lubbock right now for this ordinance? Just take me through what your thoughts on there. Whoever wants to take a crack at it first.
Yeah, I think kind of going off Catherine's point, I think trying to depoliticize it would be like helpful, because I mean, like, if you're always going to get somebody who's going to try to tie it into like one of your other political views that's maybe more or less unpopular. Is like, well, I'm not going to be against abortion because you're a hypocrite because the Iraq War, or because you don't want tax dollars to go to like hungry kids. And so I think, keeping it on the specific issue of abortion is good. Don't talk about other things Democrats want to do. Don't tie it into like universal health care. Just talk about like, the morality of allowing somebody to kill an unborn baby. I think that's like the best way to get people in the middle.
Yep. Colby?
We've kind of, at this point, we've already done a ton. I would say appeal to the, evangelical, community, but we see a bunch of signs at churches these days, so that's obviously worked. I really don't know, except put maybe emphasis on what could happen if this doesn't pass, like maybe some statistics on how many babies compared to other areas with the same population density, and see how many babies we could lose.
Yeah. And Colby brought up an interesting point, Catherine. We've been campaigning for this pretty hard since about April, March onward, right? What are some of the common misconceptions you've heard about the ordinance? Some typical arguments, right? You don't need to go into like a Ben Shapiro destroys type rant, right? But just talk us through what are some of the most common arguments you've heard door to door, talking to your friends, social media, stuff like that.
Yes, a lot of people bring up the unconstitutionality, quote unquote, of the ordinance, and that goes back to what I said earlier about the legal battle and the kind of precedent that this ordinance has, and if it's technically legal, and with the mess of the state constitution, the Texas Constitution, and kind of how that overlaps with an overarching Supreme Court decision is kind of still being worked out in this context by legal experts, as far as I know. And so, but yes, I've heard the unconstitutionality of the ordinance. It's going to be sued, or it's going to be taken to the courts. We're going to have a costly legal battle. So those are the two main arguments, I think, is the unconstitutionality and the taxpayer fees, taxpayer money that's going to be poured into this are the two main arguments. The first one, I think, is a sad argument. If we're trying to shoot down any kind of local effort to protect babies within it's within our city, okay? This is our city. We can, as our city leaders and as people of the city who elect our leaders, we should be able to decide if babies can die in our city. I think that's just a basic right, freedom of a local municipality should be. And so if you're going to not vote for this because it's unconstitutional, I don't think you understand how people are the government. And if it does go to the courts, then so be it. But maybe we save some babies' lives in the meantime is where I go with that. As far as the court fees and taxpayer taxpayer money going into this, I think that there's, and I don't know the plan, but there's a plan to help avert that, because a lawyer, an esteemed lawyer, a former Texas Solicitor General lawyer, Jonathan F. Mitchell, has offered to support and to represent any city who adopts a sanctuary city for the unborn ordinance pro bono to any kind of lawsuit, namely a Planned Parenthood lawsuit, but any lawsuit that a city is attacked with or that is brought against a city who has this ordinance, who has adopted this ordinance. Jonathan F. Mitchell has offered to represent that city for free. So that is amazing, number one, and I think something that we could lean into, and a perfectly good reason for us to go forward with this.
All right. Well, do y'all have any other thoughts on the ordinance you'd want to talk about? Catherine, that includes you, but y'all too, guys?
That's it.
Yeah. I hope another former Texas Solicitor General gets involved with this ordinance, just so we can meet him again, or we're gonna meet him this weekend. But I'm talking about.
Ted Cruz.
Yeah,
Ted Cruz. He's probably going to talk about it at convention.
Maybe.
I bet he will.
That would be amazing.
I bet he'll mention like, get up here, you tech kids, and we're going to cry, and he's going to hug us all and give us candy.
Maybe. Or he'll just
and everyone clapped.
It's funny. I do have a thought though. You were talking about how like people say, well, it's unconstitutional. I was like, I feel like even people on the left have admitted like Roe v. Wade is not like a great like legal decision. I think even RBG like Ruth Bader Ginsburg had said like she likes the outcome, but she admits that it's not like it wasn't like great legal ruling that decided that. It was kind of like, well, we feel like, the 70s are like, yeah, women's rights, so we should let them let people murder babies. So like, oh, like, where's that in the? I mean, even using the 14th Amendment as a justification, it was kind of ridiculous. Like, we all know what the 14th Amendment was for, and trying to take from that and yeah, we'll put it in this situation is kind of disgusting.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning into another episode. Colby, you have any thoughts there, or you want to outro us here?
No, I don't. But like Clay said, thank y'all for joining us, and we'll see y'all in the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Bye-bye.